This is Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich, joined by Tim Buckley, Chief Meteorologist over at FMY. And Tim, I have to look. It is Thursday, right? Thursday, January 22nd. Because sometimes events like this, you just lose all track of time, day. I'm always looking at the dates in the calendar when I'm flipping through guidance, and I'm like, man, what day of the week is this? So, today is Thursday. Our storm is about, let's say, 48 hours out for us from hitting us. Is that about the timing you're thinking? Because it definitely has slowed down a little bit from yesterday. I'm thinking by dinner time Saturday.
Saturday afternoon. Earlier in the week, we probably would have said very early in the morning on Saturday, but it has slowed down. So I think that gives people a little extra time to do what they'd like to do or do what they need to do Saturday morning, kind of into lunchtime.
Yeah, if Jeb could pull up the satellite image, I like looking at where it's at because we can see the swirl off the coast of California. Remember yesterday we were looking at the recon going out there. I'll be honest with you, it doesn't look like it moved much since yesterday. It kind of looks like it's in the exact same spot.
That's true.
I kind of wonder if they could have sent a recon, they would have done it today, but it looks like it's flying back to Keesler Air Force Base based on the flight path. But I guess they assume it'll be over California, so we'll get some upper air data. At this point, Tim, I think the focus obviously is where it should be on sleet and ice. The question really is for us, and I know for you, how long do we stay sleet? How long do we stay freezing rain? The one thing that's really fascinating in this event, and I think we talked a little bit the last couple of days, is how cold the surface layer is. That has not changed much. I mean, you see a little moderation on Sunday, but most of Saturday night, it's like low 20s and like sleet and freezing rain. That's really cold to have a warm nose over that cold of a surface layer.
It's bitterly cold stuff and a lot colder than what you would usually see for freezing rain in our area. And so, we chatted yesterday. We're here again today. Sometimes helpful to kind of go in a what changed aspect of things. I don't actually see a lot of things that have changed dramatically since yesterday. So if anything, it's kind of held consistent. Now, the bad part about that is that it looked like a really bad storm yesterday, and it still looks like a really bad storm today. But I do tend to think, based on the cold available, that there's going to be more sleet than is being shown, at least on those freezing rain maps. The problem is that the freezing rain maps are showing like an inch of freezing rain. So even if you cut that in half, you're still having huge impacts over just a big chunk of the state, and that's kind of our problem. But this map, I showed this on the news too, Brett. This is crazy because you're going from basically the Four Corners all the way to New England now is getting in on it.
Yeah, and speaking of that, we're going to have a guest here in a minute, and I want to focus on that's why I showed the national map. I've had so many questions about travel. I know you've gotten a ton. I'm still getting some today. And it's like, I tell people, I'm like, the local weather almost isn't going to matter for air travel because so many airports are going to be impacted. People outside of the winter storm are going to be impacted by this storm, even without a flake of snow, a pellet of ice, or freezing rain. So we want to bring in Alex Wilson from the Weather Channel. She's joining us from Atlanta to kind of talk about the bigger picture. Alex, I know you've been super busy as well. Hey. You're also going to be impacted by this personally like we are. What's it been like down in Atlanta, at least locally getting ready? And then talk a little bit about the national perspective of this, because this is a massive winter storm.
Sure, absolutely. Nice to finally talk to you. I feel like I've known you forever via social media. And Tim, I know we go way back to Penn State meteorology back in like the... Well, we don't need to talk about the
Another
time,
Penn
right?
Stater? What? Come on.
That's true. It's true. We're everywhere, right?
Dr. Neese's class.
Because, Yes. Oh my gosh, some of those, like I open up old books and you shudder, but it's okay. We learned a lot, right? You got to do it. Atlanta, I feel like ever since we had Snowmageddon in 2014, Atlantans, they're a little bit more, shall we say, sensitive to snow. So while I don't think that we're going to see the ice problems that you guys are going to see by a long shot, I do think we could see enough, especially as you get up in that northeast part of the city. That's where I think we're going to see some problems. And, like you guys have, my job before this was in Greenville, so very similar to Atlanta. it's a city and a forest, right? So you've got a lot of trees. All it takes is, a couple tree limbs to get coated. Those go down. And so I think power outages, while I don't think we're going to see the widespread that you guys see, I think, or at least the chance of widespread like you guys see, because I know you've been talking about the sleet potential too, and that'll be really interesting to see how that all works out, if we can keep a little bit more sleet going versus the freezing rain. But I think for us, there will be at least some sporadic power outages.
Yeah, and what's interesting when we look at this national map, Alex, we've got a lot of winter storm warnings, but we've got ice storm warnings for part of Mississippi, even northeast Louisiana, Arkansas, up into Tennessee. So it's like, how are you talking about this on a national scale when there's so many different type of impacts that this one storm is going to bring across the country?
It's a lot, right? So you've got to break it down segment by segment. You mentioned that Northwest Alabama. What's wild is they haven't been under an ice storm warning in about 5 years. Parts of northern Mississippi, the sections of Tennessee that are under it, it's been 3 years. One of our awesome weather producers, she ran the numbers, and she's like, it has been 1,000 to 1,800 days since you guys have been under these kind of warnings. So the messaging gets hard, as you guys can imagine. When you're dusty at something, or rusty at something, you're like, shoot, I got to get myself back into thinking about ice storm warnings and about thinking about ice. I think the messaging for this nationally has been the snow, it's great, it'll shut things down for a short period of time, but we can generally, even those areas that aren't super snow savvy, we can get this cleaned up. The ice is the stuff that you just don't want people to go, oh, okay, well, it's only a little bit. It's not going to be a lot. And keeping people off the road, especially where you have ice that may be ending as some snow. So then you get that ice covered by snow and people forget about it. And then they just get out on the roads. And then we've got all sorts of issues. I'd like to think that Raleigh, Atlanta, we've seen enough of these events where it's gone bananas on a roadway that I like to think that most people know to not go out. And I think Sunday's going to help us. For you guys, I'm sure you agree, the timing is working in our favor, that people aren't tempted to go to work.
Yeah, it's a lot better that it's on a weekend, I think, for sure, because you don't have that commute aspect. To me, always the stressful thing with these is if you got kids in school and you're worried about the dismissal times, that's not going to be a factor either. But what you were saying, Alex, is really interesting because in our climate here in the Carolinas, we should be kind of used to these. Maybe not every year, but at least every couple of years, we do tend to get one of these big ones. We haven't had many big ones over the last 10 years. And Brad mentioned this the other day. There's so many people that have moved in from Pennsylvania, from the Northeast, from wherever they might be. And I had a buddy who moved to Charlotte. He said, Tim, it never really is going to get that bad this weekend, is it? And I was like, no, you don't understand. We get real winter weather here. And so it'll be interesting to see how people react to it across the South that haven't experienced it yet.
Yeah, that I-85 corridor, you're right. It's tricky because I always go back to when I worked in Greenville, South Carolina. My biggest bust was a freezing rain event, and it was one of those ones where you expect and anticipate, and the models say that warm air is going to eventually erode that wedge. It's going to get moving. It's going to get moving, and it just did not get moving. And it was one of those ones where you're just banging your head against the desk because you're like, and then there are ones where you expect that wedge to set up so intently and it doesn't do it at all. So the wedge is, I think it's Jen Carfagno who says we live and die by the east wind here, and you truly do in situations like this. But I do think that people are always very surprised by the intensity of the winter weather that you can get. We think of the upstate as, the Carolinas. We think of Charlotte as, it's the Carolinas. But these areas have that unique setup that puts them in prime spot for some of these winter events.
Yeah, that's so true. It's you kind of learn that by trial by fire here sometimes.
Oh, yes. And crying at your desk, right?
Yes. Hey, Alex, I said I used to have hair before I moved to the Carolinas. I tell people that's what it's like forecasting here. It's it's brutal because the cold air damming, it always stays longer than you expect. It's stronger than it is. It's really hard to forecast. Guidance is almost useless. It's really trial and error and experience. But I want to ask you another question about this storm because can you remember? I was trying to think about this today. We were talking in the office. I can't remember a storm that was this widespread over the United States in a while. Did you guys look at how widespread this is and when the last time we've had one this affecting so many people across the eastern part of the country?
I don't know that we ran the number on exact, population and when the last time we had a storm this expansive, but I know it's more than 20 states seeing, huge snowfall amounts. So we've got, you look at this, it's what? Plains, Southern Plains, Mid-South, Tennessee Valley, Southeast, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, and now that the storm looks to be taking more of a Euro track and moving up into the New England states, now you've got like Boston, Southern New England in play. So, it's taking the scenic route because you don't have, the true nor'easter that kind of leaves out other areas off to the west. And you've also got the similarities of things like what we called Cora last year, the one that went through the southeast, brought Atlanta some big snow, but didn't necessarily, cause problems farther north. So this one's taking such a unique track. But that's actually a really good question. So I'm going to have us run the numbers tomorrow or tonight while we're doing research. Right? We're always looking for new stats on this.
I think you could probably pull up the square mileage of the watch area and try to figure that out. It'd be kind of cool to figure that out.
It's insane, yeah. Just the amount of, we have to do so many regions because you just can't, even to get close enough where people could make out their neighborhood or, their part of the state. If we showed the national map, there's just colors everywhere.
Yeah, I got a question for you. You guys do a great job covering these. How many crews are you guys going to have spread out? Do you have enough people to cover this one?
It's getting, we're getting stretched out. We're like a game of Twister right now here, right? I think we've got 7 crews. So I believe we've got Dallas, we've got Little Rock, do we have Oklahoma City? We'll have Asheville, we will have Nashville, we will have Washington, D.C., we have Philly, I believe we have New York.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, so we've got all the real estate, and then obviously, you've got crews that are able to, give us coverage. And of course, viewers will send pictures. And I know it gets to be a lot of the country. You guys are in deep with all sorts of precip types in your own area. So having enough crews in the regional spaces to really tell the story, they're really strategic with where they're sending everybody out.
You're having to talk about this storm, many days ahead of time, like we all do nowadays. We're looking at it in advance, and you're seeing it the whole country. Are you kind of blown away, or are we all just used to it by now, how the models just kind of, these wild shifts? And you probably get feedback from all corners of the country. Like a couple days ago, didn't look like a New England storm. Well, now it is.
Right.
So what's that like?
100%. I think it means you have to be really measured, and I know you guys do the same thing. You have to be measured in the communication that you're putting out at the time, right? So Monday and Tuesday, you're pretty general in the forecast. You're pretty general in the impacts and the locations, right? Because we've all learned this too many times. You see a storm that's a slam dunk for this area, and then the next day you see it shift 100 miles north. And now it's no longer, look at Nashville earlier this week. If we would have sung from the rooftops that Nashville was going to see 2 feet of snow, the next morning you wake up, Nashville's barely in the snow now, and now we're looking at significant ice. So I think with these kind of systems, as opposed to what you guys deal with, the social media where it's, one snapshot of one run of one model at hour 2:16, you have to, really be careful and thoughtful and really be honest about what you don't know at that point, because everybody wants the answers, and it's real easy to go, this is what's going to happen, but I think you also have to be very transparent with the what you don't know.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm a big fan of that. Is here's what we know and don't know, and I think that's transparency in the forecast process. So, Alex, thanks so much. I know you're super busy, and hopefully it's a great weekend for you, and you're not stuck there all weekend. But be safe out there. We'll appreciate it. We'll be catching your coverage.
Thank
I know
you.
Everybody will be glued to it as well as across the entire country.
Well, I'm sure you guys are going 24/7, so good luck to you. I know you guys. I'm actually going to be watching your social medias and stuff because you guys are really in the thick of it, and I'm hopeful it's more sleet for you guys.
Oh, my fingers are crossed. I hope it is too. We don't want the power outages, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah,
Tim.
Nice to see you.
Thanks, Alex.
Tim, that is the $1 million question for us, right? Is the sleet, freezing rain mixture. What are your thoughts up your way? I kind of got my thoughts down here. And as we kind of started the program talking about how cold that surface layer is, I think as you mentioned, if the surface layer was a little warmer, we'd probably go mostly freezing rain. But because it's so cold, it feels to me like this would allow it to stay sleet a lot longer because it's going to refreeze those raindrops.
Yeah, it's very interesting to look at the temperature profile, and like we were explaining yesterday, it matters on the thickness of the cold toward the ground and then the thickness of the warmth above the ground. So there's those two factors at play. But we're within range now that we have the forecast model that we use here in-house, and we both use the same one. And I have it pulled up here. It's showing like about 15 degrees for Greensboro Saturday evening. And at that point, still giving us some snow. I mean, this is crazy. It does happen before, but it's been a very long time since we've had winter precipitation with temperatures in the teens. Yeah. Sometimes we joke about it being too cold to snow or too cold to have winter weather. That's actually not a thing. It's just often that it might be too dry when you have temperatures that are that low. Yeah. But it keeps these numbers very low throughout the entire system. I mean, this is Sunday morning now, showing teens and 20s. And as we go throughout the day on Sunday, we lose the range of the model there. But it only gets, by the afternoon still, only into the low 20s. And I'm interested by this too, Brad. I've seen this on a couple of models. Is there any drier spots? Are there any little patches that develop on Sunday? That could be a help, or it actually might not be that much of a help, because sometimes even in that setup we would still have freezing drizzle that would happen within our area.
Tim, I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of my astute viewers who was watching my forecast in the evening noticed what he thought was a dry slot as well, and I exactly explained what you just said. The dry slot isn't always a good thing in this situation, because as you mentioned, it sometimes creates freezing drizzle. And freezing drizzle, as we talked about, I think it was Tuesday, actually accumulates better than freezing rain, because if you think about heavy freezing rain, it's big drops. It falls so heavily that it can't freeze quick enough, and so it runs off. Freezing drizzle, because it's light, sticks to everything. And so you're right. I think a dry slot could give us prolonged freezing drizzle, which would not necessarily be a good thing.
Yeah, try and find ways out of this storm. Like, is there an exit route? Is there any way that you can kind of get out of a bad impact here? And I can't seem to find one. I think your best case scenario, you're still probably having at least moderate ice impacts and scattered power outages rather than widespread. Like, that might be your best case scenario. And it does vary by the area. I think I saw your map. I think it's pretty similar to what we put out here and what a lot of the weather services are sharing. Yeah. You kind of have that bullseye of icing right over Charlotte. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and so we'll show that map. And I'll be transparent. This is kind of where I think it is now, but I've mentioned it all day, Tim. This could shift 20 or 30 miles north or south, and it would change dramatically who gets clobbered. And so I've been trying to say this because I think sometimes you got to pull back, because I think in some instances people aren't taking this seriously, but then you get other where it's like almost mass hysteria. Like people are like, oh my gosh, blackout everywhere. And I'm like, almost want to tell people you got to slow down a little bit. Not everybody's going to lose power, but somebody is. And we're trying to pinpoint where that area is going to be. And honestly, that's probably the hardest part, is figuring out where that is. But it's also why you should prepare, because we don't know where that location is, you got to assume it's going to be your location and prepare just the same.
I mean, you think about the worst ice storm basically in Carolina memory or Carolina history. I was just looking up the number here. The Carolina ice storm in 2002 that we've talked about all week, there were about 2 million customers in the state without power. So that's a lot. But like you said, it's not everybody. Yeah. And so it does kind of, it matters. We have about 10, 11 million people in the state now. It's been a while since there's been a big storm like this. So it's really so hard to say what the impact will be on the power side of things. But unfortunately, it's really focused on the population centers as well. Yes. I mean, Raleigh's getting this storm. The Triad is getting this storm. Charlotte is getting this storm. We don't favor areas, but in terms of impact, people live where people live, and that's going to have a bigger task of fixing all those things. Whereas if you had it hitting in the forest somewhere, you're not picking up the trees there. You're not fixing power lines over there.
Yeah, there's just more stuff to break in those population centers from the ice, and so. Yeah, the worst case scenario would be the I-85 corridor, if you think from the upstate of South Carolina through Charlotte and up towards your area, or even over towards Raleigh. So, that's the heart of our population center. It's almost become like a southeastern corridor of population where it's just exploded, and that's where you worry about. And Alex brought up a good point. We love our trees here just as much as everybody, but we have a lot of trees in our urban corridor here, so the trees become a big problem in a situation like this. And as much as we talk about the weight of ice on power lines, I would say half of the outages happen because the branches get weighed down and fall into the power lines themselves. So you've got this double whammy. The power lines could fail, in my opinion, 3 ways in an ice storm: weight directly on the power line, weight on a tree branch, and then slick roads in a car sliding off and taking a power pole out. So you've got multiple ways that power can be taken out in an ice storm, and that's like the triple whammy.
Really is. There's, pick your poison here. There's a bunch of those options that can be had. And even we've talked a lot about the power impacts here, the road impacts we haven't talked about too much. It's going to be basically impossible to get around once you get toward Sunday, probably already in the morning, but certainly by the afternoon and the evening, you're just not going around, I wouldn't say. And that situation next week, those morning lows are just going to be brutal. So this is going to be a glacier on the roads, whatever sleet and whatever ice is out there. That's going to be a big issue for a long time. And that's kind of, we've been telling people, once you get where you get to on Saturday afternoon, kind of plan to be there at least a couple of days, if not several, unless you really have to get out and you're in working EMS or something.
Yeah, that's for sure. And just to remind everybody, we are going to be taking questions tonight in the second half hour. You see the number below us. You've got a question for Tim and I. It's 704-329-3600. Hopefully there'll be some different questions. We got kind of the same question, but hopefully one question will answer everybody else who has a very similar question across the board. So one of the things you just mentioned, Tim, and I've been thinking about this a lot, we get caught up in the amounts, the ice totals. We can tell you what the totals are going to be, but at the end of the day, you bring up a very good point. It's the impact to our lives, and I think for the layman, a quarter inch doesn't seem like a lot of ice, Tim. I was on the radio today talking to sports radio of all places, and they were having viewers saying, "Oh, it's only 1 to 3 inches of sleet and a quarter inch of ice. That's no big deal." And it was like they almost didn't grasp like that's a big deal. And so I think that's the hard part, is not focusing on that number, but what that number represents as far as an impact. And that's, as you mentioned, I think the roads, the travel, is probably the one thing I'm the most confident in is going to be horrible because the ground is cold, and with those surface temperatures in the teens and 20s, man, you hope it's sleet, because if there's any moisture like liquid mixed in there, that seems just like a recipe for disaster on area, especially elevated roadways. Think about that. I don't think there's enough brine and salt you could throw down to really save a bridge or overpass when it's 21 with sleet or freezing rain.
Yeah, I mean, I admire the efforts. I salute them. I saw a lot of brining operations myself today. I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference.
Yeah.
It's going to be very difficult to keep those roads in good order. Now, they'll have the interstates in tip-top shape by Monday at lunchtime, I'm sure. But all the other roads, that's going to be hard to do. And we probably should mention, too, another danger, which we see this in severe weather outbreaks during the springtime. But you talk about another danger of if you're out and about on those roads, you could have a tree fall on your car. I mean, those are things that happen. And we haven't mentioned wind yet, I don't believe. No. It will be pretty gusty, especially toward the end of Sunday, and even more so on Monday. So we might not be totally out of the woods with power outages until Tuesday-ish in my brain.
Yeah, one of the sounds I remember from the 2002 storm, I was staying in the hotel over here, was the night after all the ice fell. The constant sound of cracking and creaking of trees and branches just falling. It was loud. And so, it was pretty crazy. So I showed my fun graphic there earlier. Thanks, Jeff, for pulling that up. Because I don't know about you, Tim. I still think people get confused what sleet and freezing rain is. They think freezing rain is sleet and sleet is freezing rain. I love this analogy. I've seen it everywhere. I did not come up with this myself. I've seen it a bazillion times, but I stole it anyways. Sleet is like sprinkles on a donut, and freezing rain is like the glaze. The reason that the freezing rain is so problematic, you see on the donut, it wraps around the donut and covers it completely. That's what it does to power lines and tree branches, where the sleet, there's some frosting on that donut, which looks really delicious, by the way, and Panthers colors, which is awesome. But those pellets, they bounce off and they get to the ground, but they kind of act almost like, when they're loose like that, they act like ball bearings or marbles, and they can be really slick. They just don't melt very efficiently like snowflakes.
No, they really don't. And I don't have one of these amazing weather brains where I remember every storm and I can put the year on it and I can put the number and the amount to it. But I do remember, this was several years ago here in Greensboro, we had a storm, and it might be like this weekend. We got at least 2 to 3 inches of sleet on the ground. You know, it changed over quicker than we thought, and boy, did it bust our forecast. I think we were forecasting like 7 to 10 inches of snow, and we ended up getting 2 to 3 inches of sleet, because that's what happens.
That's about right.
If you don't know about that warm nose. That stuff was on the road for 2 weeks. I mean, it wouldn't go anywhere. And it never really occurred to me, this is earlier in my career, and I hadn't really thought about the difference between melting sleet versus melting snow, because I don't think I'd ever experienced a storm like that before. But that really is going to be something that we'll have to live with if we're fortunate enough to have that much sleet. We can try and melt it if the power's on. We'll gladly try and do that.
Yeah, I feel like I've been through a lot of sleet storms at some point here, because it's very common in the Piedmont, especially with the cold air damming. And the thing you always reminds me of a sleet storm is the sound. First of all, you just hear it falling everywhere. The other thing is, when you look outside, the grass is the one area where there's nothing, because it falls in between the blades of grass. But the mulch beds, the cars, the parking lots, anything that's flat, that's where all the sleet kind of sticks. It's kind of the reverse of snow, where it only sticks to the grass. It sticks to everything but the grass. It's really weird when it happens like that. Yeah,
Grapple is kind of the same way. We've had a couple of Grapple storms or bursts the last couple months, and same, just like you said, the mulch beds, the pine straw, the whatever, that's where you're seeing it more so than on the grass. So we'll see. I'm definitely interested to see when we, not only just when we change over to freezing rain, but I'm also interested to see if we start as snow, and when we change that snow into sleet, because I do still think we have a shot, at least at my area up in Greensboro, of maybe squeaking out an inch or two of snowfall at the beginning. I'm not going to guarantee that, but it's something worth watching. And if you've got kids that want to see snow or play in the snow, and it starts coming down, bundle them up and get out there, because it's not going to last very long.
Yeah, Tim, our job is to look in the future, and I'm already envisioning what's going to happen Saturday when the snow starts, and everyone goes, I thought you said this wasn't going to be snow. And you'll have to say, hey, this isn't going to last very long. It's going to change within an hour or two, and that's kind of what we expect. But you can hear the people already saying that, and then an hour or two later they'll go, oh, it's sleet, and that's kind of the way these storms go. Okay, so we're coming up at the top of the hour. We're going to take a quick break, everybody. If you have those questions, send them in. Jeb's working hard over there. I hear the keyboard going crazy. So 704-329-3600. We're going to take the whole second half hour here and answer your questions about our winter storm. We'll be right back. Stick around. All right, welcome back. Tim Buckley joins me again for our second half hour. We were going to kick it off with some questions here, Tim, and I'll let you read this first one. This is a great question. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, but we got a young, aspiring meteorologist who has a really good question for us tonight.
All right, so Cade is in the 3rd grade. He loves studying the weather, wants to know more about the hurricane hunters. Will they give a lot of different information, like maybe more snow or more ice? And also, how long does it take for the hurricane hunters info to get included into the models? This is a great question, and it's something that we just saw go into real action the last couple of days when they were flying into this storm over in California or off the coast, like we were saying. That data was into the models just within a couple of hours. I believe they got it into what we would call the 0Z runs, which is the nighttime versions of the computer models, and so it happens pretty quickly. It doesn't take a long time for them to get that where it needs to go, which I thought was pretty impressive.
Yeah. So Tim, I didn't know if they were flying today, so I just looked. There's actually 3 planes flying right now. One is flying over the Gulf, sampling the Gulf down to the south. So let me show you. I'm going to pull up the website, Tropical Tidbits. I'm not going to give anything away. So there's the plane from San Francisco looks like it's flying back across the country. So that's the plane that flew yesterday. It's coming back to Keesler. But you can see there is a flight right now in progress that is flying off the coast of California. It's doing some drop-ons, at least 2 in that storm. But here's the interesting one, Tim. Look at this. There's one flying over the Gulf off of Tampa, and it's sampling the atmosphere to our south, which is probably an area I wish they would have sampled yesterday, because that will actually probably help quite a bit for our moisture transport, and more importantly, that warm nose. This is going to help us figure out that warm nose a little bit better. So 3 planes, 2 of them are doing drop-ons over water, one over the Gulf and one over the Pacific. And then what's happening with the one flying back from San Francisco, it's just going to take upper air measurements as it's flying. But 3 missions technically kind of going on, and that should be in the 0Z runs tonight, which are basically starting right now.
And I guess the follow-up to that would be, have they always done this? And if so, how long? And how common? And how do they determine which one is worthy of putting the resources out to a winter storm mission?
Well, we're going to have to get a hurricane hunter on there. I know a couple of them online. Maybe we'll have to do that. Yeah. But I will tell you, I think they've done this occasionally. I know I remember even 20 years ago, a couple big nor'easters they've flown into, but it was kind of just like, hey, like a last-minute thing, let's do this. But I think what's happened, Tim, and I know you saw this research too, they started flying missions on the West Coast for atmospheric rivers to help forecast those. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe they saw some use out of that and said, hey, why don't we task the hurricane hunters during the off-season to help with bigger storms like that? And so maybe that's what they're doing now. And I think if they can prove that this works, this might become a more normal thing, especially for bigger systems like we're seeing here.
Yeah, it's super helpful when the storm is in a data-poor area like an ocean. You only have so much to go off of. And, with all the struggles of the computer models, and we need better forecasts and all these things, we would welcome all the better data that we can get. And so it's encouraging to see that they're doing this, especially for a storm that's going to impact basically, broad brush, a third of the country's population at minimum, it seems.
Yeah. I'm going to look and see. The 0Z's not running now, but I'm going to look and see if it made it into the models tonight. There's actually a site where you can see added data that goes in. And last night's run, there was like 25 drops on. So far, I haven't seen anything go into today. But that's a great question. Thanks, Cade. That was an awesome question. Jeb, what's our next question? Let's see this one. How long do you think it will be until the roads are drivable again, given the cold temperatures on Monday and Tuesday? Wow. That is actually a really good question, Tim. We alluded to it a little bit. The cold air behind it, I think drivable is definitely a subjective question because some of us will probably say it's got to be bone dry. Other people are like, I can drive with a little bit. But I think the problem here is the sun helps, right? Sun is our best snow and ice removal we have in the South. The problem is the sun only lasts so long, and we've got these cold overnight temperatures. we're probably going to see a lot of thawing and refreezing every day, which means black ice and slick spots probably every morning. Wouldn't you say for maybe the rest of the week?
I think so. I think it'll take all week, and I wouldn't even guarantee it'll all be gone by the end of the week because of how cold it is. I mean, we could be in my area below freezing basically through Wednesday, and that's daytime too. So it's going to be difficult. But like you said, it depends on what you consider drivable. It also depends on what roads you're talking about, because we have two types of roads in the Carolinas. We have roads that get plowed, and we have roads that never get plowed. And I think those neighborhood streets that just, they don't get attention because it's not part of the plan or the budget, they're going to still probably be glacierized until Thursday, Friday, maybe next Saturday or so. So just kind of be mentally prepared for that, and consider that when planning, because you're going to need to get out of the house at some point. So maybe you have to park somewhere else or rely on a friend or something, but you got to consider that plan ahead of time, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's, I think, as you mentioned it, and I don't feel like that bad saying this. I think there's going to be a lot of school cancellations and delays next week, especially considering some of the minor events that have caused that. I can't imagine what this week will look like. What's our next question, Jeb?
Yeah.
We'll let Tim read this one.
Hello there. With the potential for power outages, when you say we could be without power for days, does that include Charlotte, mostly rural areas? Would Charlotte have better access to help with the outages? It's also a great question. I know we've heard from Duke Energy a little bit the last couple of days. They're certainly aware of the storm. They plan for these things. So the question, obviously, Charlotte is subject to power outages. Everywhere within whoever's seeing us right now, basically subject to power outages. I don't think that the crews are going to be able to fix a lot of them in short order. I mean, if you have 1 million people without power, it's going to take several days to fix. And unfortunately, even if there's 1 million people without power, someone's lights are going to get turned on first. But there's also going to be someone whose lights are turned on last. And that might take until the end of the week. So I think you should probably be prepared for that as well, that we could still have customers that are waiting by the end of next week as well.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that, Tim, Jeb, can you show the winter storm warning and watch graphic again? I think this will help explain what I'm going to say here. There are only so many crews to fix power lines in the whole country, right? Typically, if there's a hurricane, everybody goes there. If there's a big ice storm, they all go there. When a storm stretches from Texas to New England and there's a bunch of ice in between, I heard this on a call today when I was with the emergency managers. The one concern they had was how thin the crews were going to be spread out over such a big area. So to Tim's point, I agree with you, Tim. I think because of the expanse of this storm and the ice, just not the snow, the ice, it might take a little bit longer. And as you know, when you're trying to remove trees as well as fix power lines, that slows everything down. So I don't think it matters if you're rural, urban. If there's an outage, it could be a while. And that's why you're hearing not only us, but the Weather Service, the governor, emergency managers say you need to be prepared for the power to be out, not for a day, but for days. And I think that's good advice, Tim.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully we can get some help from crews, to our south in Florida or something. Or a lot of the storms in the north, and this might sound silly to us here, a lot of the storms in the north, they don't cause a ton of power outages most often, unless they're involving ice. So if you get a foot of snow or whatever in Ohio, you're probably not losing a lot of power there with that.
No.
So you can still get crews to come down and help, but they have to help Mississippi, and they have to help Alabama, and they have to help Tennessee. So we're on the list.
Yep.
It's just going to be a big need, I would say.
Yeah, I've even seen crews come down from Quebec and eastern Canada to come help the United States when we have big ice storms. So that's pretty common as well. I know Duke's all over it. I'm kind of curious to see how their healing power, they have a way to redirect power now, and they buried lines. So I'm kind of curious to see how quickly they restore, because technology has changed a lot since the last big storm we've had here.
they call it that self-healing technology,
Yeah.
and it reroutes the path of the power to your house, which is pretty cool and very smart. So it'll be interesting. I don't know that we've had a big storm in the area since they've enabled that, but we've done a bunch of stories about that, which is pretty interesting to see.
All right. Yeah, that's a great question, though. Here's our next question. This one is, why do some forecasts predict Boone in the high country with some of the worst ice while others, like yours, show less ice? I think this is geared towards me. What factors are driving that forecast difference? I think I answered this question online as well. I had a very similar question because I think a lot of folks are seeing like just strict model output. And as we talked about, Tim, some of the raw QPF converted directly to ice is kind of not really accurate. But I will also say this, and I mentioned this in my my comments online, I'm still thinking a quarter inch of ice in parts of the mountains, which is more than enough to cause damage. So I think we're splitting hairs sometimes when it says, hey, is it a quarter or a half an inch or 6/10? Pretty much anything above a quarter is going to cause some damage. But I will say this, Tim, too. I do think in the mountains, I do think more mixing is going to occur early on, which could keep the freezing rain totals lower and not until the very end of the storm.
I mean, just from my point of view, I would say my forecast confidence level when it comes to predicting the weather up in Boone versus the weather here in the Piedmont, not totally my wheelhouse, so it's not always where I'm focusing most of my attention. It's also not really in our area that we cover all the time, but there are so many other factors, and a lot of times up that way you might have a ton of ice accretion or accumulation on one side of the mountain, more so on the other side.
Yes.
So it is going to be a lot more locally driven up that way, and so specifically, we do this with snow forecasts too, but I would say when it comes to ice forecasts, there is a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And kind of at the end of the day, what you need to know is we have the chance of bad ice.
Yeah.
And that would include Boone. It would basically include the whole area. So prepare for that. No one's going to be upset if you don't get the bad ice.
Yeah.
But I think all of us should prepare for that and probably not focus on, I've seen some maps, even from the Weather Service, they put these out to the decimal point, to the hundredths of an inch.
We're not that good.
Let's just kind of round things.
Yeah.
Impacts here. Are you
Yeah.
going to get minor ice or moderate? I think most of us are expecting moderate ice, and some areas could get major.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the splitting of the hairs.
Yeah, if it needs a higher total for you to get ready for this, then put it as high as you want because it's a high impact
Yeah,
event.
get ready.
When I hear people say that, it's like I always say it's enough to cause significant damage. So that's all you really need to know. It's going to be enough to cause damage. I really say anywhere in our viewing areas, Tim, probably should be prepared for damaging ice and hope that it doesn't happen. I think that's the best advice we could give everybody.
I think so too. I am still concerned. I don't know if you'll agree or disagree. I am still concerned that folks might not be taking it super seriously, and
Yes.
I think it's because that those snowfall total numbers we're not giving you that right
Yeah.
now. You would like me to give you a map that says you're getting a foot of snow, and then
Yeah.
you'd probably buy more bread, which is crazy because this might have a bigger impact, or probably will have
Yeah.
a bigger impact to our lives, and a longer lasting one as well. Now, at the same time, though, I have seen the pictures of the grocery store, and they look bare too. So maybe there are two types of people. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I there's a term called snow blindness, Tim, and it has to do with bright sun and snow and not being able to see. I think there's another term that we could use snow blindness for. It's when we talk about forecasts, people get blinded by just the snowfall totals, and they disregard all the other information. And it's difficult. I guess the best way to equate it would be like during hurricane season, where people hyper-focus on just the center of the storm, and they forget like the whole storm causes damage, not just the middle. And sometimes you'll hear people, if the center doesn't go over their location, like it's going to miss us. And it's like, no, now you're on the east side of the storm. That's the worst part to be in. And it's almost like with this storm. Yeah, the snow shifted north, but now that puts us on like the east side of a hurricane. It's the worst part. We're going to get ice.
Yeah. Or they're only focusing on the wind speed and they forget about the rain. And, there are so many comparisons that are good ones here. But all of you should know, and you probably do because you're weather fans watching, it's going to be a bad storm. It's just not going to be a fun one. And that's what we've said all week. I told our news team on Monday, let's call this a winter storm. Let's not call it a snowstorm. And that was back when either was still possible. But we have so many winter threats around here that you need to consider that.
Oh gosh, Tim, we're spending too much time together. We think alike, because we literally put out a push notification on Monday that said weekend snowstorm, and I cringed and I go, "Don't call this a snowstorm. Call this a winter storm," because that's what it is. And I appreciate that. So our next question, very good question here, Tim. I'll let you read this one.
Is there any area to the west that you keep an eye on as an indicator of what we may experience? This is a really nice question.
Good question.
And I think there's some folklore that goes along with this, right? I'll probably let Brad take that part, but I will say, when it comes to whatever type of snow, winter it is, snowstorm or ice storm, I always like to see what's going on in the south. There was a storm a couple of years ago that I was kind of brushing off a little bit, and then it started snowing in Texas really well. It started snowing in Mississippi really well. I knew at that point that I was cooked, and I needed to adjust because that thing was overperforming. So those are trends that you can observe. Nashville would be another example. But Brad, is there something to this that if it snows in Atlanta, it's going to snow in Charlotte?
So I've heard this since the day I got here, Tim, and as a scientist, I try to be unbiased, and I go, you know what? I'm going to look at the data. And so one of my first blogs I did early on, I went back and looked at all the snow events in each city, and I couldn't find a correlation. And the biggest correlation I can tell you why this doesn't work, we average like twice as much snow and ice than Atlanta. So they're definitely, probably more snow here than Atlanta means there's a lot of events where it never happens down there. But I do think where this comes from, like most folklore, there's a grain of truth to it. It's just misinterpreted. Big storms that come from the southwest affect the entire southeast, kind of like this storm. And people tend to remember the big ones that affected both Atlanta and Charlotte, and they tend to forget the ones that just impacted us. So I think that's what happens. It's kind of one of those things, because I think of the biggest storm in my time here, 2004, we had 2 feet of snow in Charlotte, and you go past Greenville, South Carolina, there wasn't a flake on the ground. It was just here. So there are events like that where it doesn't happen in both cities. And that's the best way to find a correlation. We should average the exact same amount of snow if there is a correlation to that. And there just isn't. We're like twice as much as them.
But maybe to answer the question another way, though, is like, if we are wanting to watch what's happening with the storm, which we do like to do, hey, let's look at Atlanta or Birmingham, or let's look at their forecast, and then let's look at what's happening. So comparing their expectation, is it doing more or doing less?
Yes.
Those are things that can be helpful to us, because it might signal that we've been working off of some bad data and that we need to adjust in real time. So that's something we watch.
I even said that yesterday, Tim. I'm like, I was hoping for the snow to start in Texas and Oklahoma and see what it does, because that would give us a really good cue on what the storm is doing compared to guidance. I think that's a really good key. This is a great question we just got, and I actually called out a national report we did on this today. Sorry, NBC. Are the trees in my house going to explode? Tim, I don't know if you saw this. One TikToker or YouTuber put out a crazy graphic in the upper Midwest, circled an area, said tree explosion area. And it's ridiculous, first of all, but it is based on something that does happen occasionally. It's called tree cracking, okay? And this happens early in the season up north, and really the Northwoods, Minnesota, upper Midwest, even the Great Lakes and Michigan, we had this. The first Arctic outbreak of the season, when the trees are just starting to go dormant, the sap can freeze quickly, and you can get cracking of the bark. It'll make noise, but they don't explode. It's just a cracking sound. And it doesn't happen in the South because we just don't get that cold, and the trees are now in January, everything's dormant, so there's not moving sap for this to really happen. But it's a weird question. Have you gotten this at all?
It's funny. I haven't gotten this question, but my co-anchor here, he's a Wisconsin guy, and he still follows the weather up there. Whenever you move from the north to the south, you still follow that weather. You always want to know how good you got it. And so he was telling me they got a minus 50 wind chill in the Northwoods or something the other day. But in any case, his friend Luke Sampe, who's a meteorologist up that way, he was just doing a fact check on this thing. about the trees popping. I never heard of it before.
Yeah.
And it just sounds very silly. So
Yeah.
don't worry about that, but our trees could come down for another reason.
Yeah, trees will explode here because of weight of ice, not because they're getting too cold.
Yeah, those pine trees.
All right, Jeb, we got another good question in there. No flight questions. That's no. This is a question I've gotten a lot. What is the best time to apply salt or ice melt? Because I don't like to waste this stuff, because there's not a lot going around right now, and you just don't want to throw this out unless you need it. I tend to wait until the ice actually forms so you know where to put it. I mean, to me, that makes the most sense. But if you want to pre-treat, just do it lightly. Don't go crazy with it right away. But what do you think, Tim? When's the best time to do that? Before a storm or during a storm, or do you wait till after the storm?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you wait until the whole thing is over and you have a pretty sizable sheet of ice, you got to use a lot of that stuff to kind of
That's
get
true.
after it. So, I mean, if the ice is that thick, you're not going to melt it very easily with those products. So
Yeah.
I would say maybe something in the middle.
Yeah.
I do tend to put a little sprinkling down. It's always going to make you feel good that you're doing something as well. But, maybe during the event is a good choice.
Yeah.
And probably wait until it starts to change over to freezing rain. That sleet is not going to accumulate super easily on you. So you might wait until that icing starts. And like Brad said, the ice might not accumulate to everything in sight. The driveway might be a little harder than the deck, for example, or think about surfaces that you use the most and kind of prioritize those. Brad, you put a cool video out on your Instagram I saw today, though, of just a lot of helpful tips. Things like the tarps could help you out as well. Those were good ideas, and now I've got to do a lot of laundry because you said that we should wash all of our clothes.
Yeah, because a lot of folks wait to the weekend to do their laundry, and it's like, this might not be the weekend to wait. Get it done, because you might not have power to do it, and then you'd want to keep those clothes for warming. Yeah, I was saying, because my son was trying to find ice melt, because he's a little entrepreneur. He was like trying to buy up as much as he could, because he's going to go out in the neighborhood and then treat people's yards or lawns and sidewalks for money.
Oh, good.
And but he couldn't find a lot. He only got like 4 or 5 things of it. And I said, well, because it's hard to find, just tell people, especially for like steps, just cover them with the tarp or blanket, and then when the ice is done, you can pull it up and they're totally clean. So it works for your car as well, by the way. It's a cheap and easy way to do it. So we got a great question here, Tim, and I know we both can answer this, but this is something that many people may not know about. We talked about the hurricane hunters. The question is, do commercial aircraft capture the kind of upper air data that would feed into models? If so, do they? If not, why not? And I'll answer this simply, and I'll let you go on, Tim, is yes, they do. The data for every airplane that takes off and lands feeds data into our models. So we do use that. In fact, I've seen chasers, when chasing in the planes, use a nearby plane to get a quick profile of the atmosphere taking off so they can kind of forecast where to chase a tornado. So this is very useful information.
It's very useful information. It's not exactly the same as the hurricane hunters, which are literally launching stuff into the atmosphere and letting it drop through the whole column and everything.
Yeah.
But yes, these are real observations that we can get daily. And we actually have a little bit of an experiment with this. If you'll remember that thing called COVID that happened a couple of years ago, there was a dramatic decrease, if not a halt, I don't remember, but there was a big decrease anyway about airline travel. People weren't flying as much, and so there weren't as many flights. And there was stipulation, or there was question at the time, let's see how that affects the weather models, because there were fewer observations going into the system. So we're actually able to test this, and I believe there was at least some degradation in skill. It's not the main thing that goes into them, but it is something of a piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, during COVID, it was primarily international travel. Remember, Tim, like traveling from Europe to the United States and Southeast Asia, because those planes are going over that data void of the ocean where we don't have a bunch of data. And if I remember the study over that year of COVID, I think they were degraded around 10 or 11% in accuracy. And Because if you think about if all the oceans aren't being covered by a lot of flights, that's the long wave pattern, we call it the troughs and ridges, would be slightly harder to forecast because we're not getting that upper air data. And if you've ever been in a plane, especially I fly Delta a lot, you can pull up the seat, the screen behind, and you can look at your flight information. It'll tell you the temperature, the dew point, and your wind speed outside in real time. It's kind of cool to watch that.
Yeah. Brad and I are probably the same people on the airplane that you're watching Netflix or whatever on the screen, and we've got the map. In fact, I saw a meme the other day on Twitter, and it was the guy. He's got the map on the seat screen, then he's got his laptop up with a better flight tracker, and he's just like monitoring the situation.
I'm always amazed how cold it is out there. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's minus 47 degrees. It's like crazy cold outside, you know. Sometimes even colder. Yeah, that's really cool. So we've got another question here. Tim, I'll let you read this one. This is a good question, actually.
Okay, here we go. Is there any way that the warm nose will disappear, or at least could be a thinner nose, or a thinner zone at least? It's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think when we get to this point in the storm, we're thinking about what do we know that's locked in and what's a little more durable and what's a little less durable. I think at this point in time, and just knowing the Carolinas weather that we do, it's very rare that the level of warmth above our heads is underestimated, or sorry, it's very rare that it's overestimated.
Yeah.
Usually the models are underestimating how much warmth we have above our heads. Obviously, a couple days away, anything could change. But I would be floored if that warm nose shrunk a lot or went away. That would really surprise me. Just the trends that we watch, usually the cold air wedge is a little stronger than expected, and at the same time, that warmth above our heads is also a little stronger than expected. That's why a lot of our snow forecasts in the past have busted when you turn to sleet too early. It's a little rare to turn to sleet too late, in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think that's where the hurricane hunter down in the Gulf is going to help us out, because that's kind of the location the warm nose would be coming from. So I think it's going to give us a good hint at that. You're right, Tim. We have a lot of weather data from the surface. I mean, everyone's got a backyard weather station, airports, Doppler radars. We don't have a lot of information above our heads. We got to rely on the aircraft and the upper air data. So if there's going to be an air, it's going to be above our heads. And so yeah, there is definitely some wiggle room, and that's probably the $1 million question, because that will be the difference between freezing rain and sleet. I don't think it goes away. I think the thickness is what we don't know, Tim, and the duration of that thickness, that will be the hardest part.
I think so too. I do have this graphic pulled up. I think I showed it yesterday, but Jeb, if you wanted to punch it up, it has two lines on here. So this is Sunday afternoon. It's not perfect. It doesn't line up exactly with the precip type, but it's good enough. That's going to be your 32-degree line in yellow above our heads, about 3,500 feet or so in the air. So that's where it's above freezing. I was actually looking at one of the computer models. It forecasts above Greensboro to be about 45 degrees Sunday afternoon. And we're going to be in the 20s here at the ground. And so that's just one model's opinion. But it's a dramatic warm nose. And if people don't even know what a warm nose is, that's just that level of warmth above our heads where it isn't usually. Typically the air cools as you go up with height. This is different in this type of situation.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Tim. I was looking at BuffKit, which is a program I use to look at soundings, and I noticed that same thing, like up around 4,000 or 5,000 feet above Charlotte. It was like 10 degrees above 0 Celsius, which is super warm. And then about 400 or 500 feet above the ground, it was 10 degrees below Celsius. It was like this crazy cold air near the surface. I had just never had seen such a difference within 5,000 feet. And that's what makes this storm so unique, and also why we're so worried about it, because that means a lot of liquid is falling into cold, cold, cold air.
And it's harder to refreeze that warmer liquid into a sleet pellet if that's what you're trying to do too. So there's a lot to be concerned about for sure.
Yeah, so one last tip. We're almost out of time here. We're just going to give you the emergency supplies. You got time to prepare out there. The good news about the slower approach of this, Tim, is I think people that worked and don't have a lot of time to prepare today and tomorrow, You might have Saturday. If it's your day off, you will have the morning to go. Now, I would not go to Costco Saturday morning on a good day. I certainly would not do it this weekend because it is going to be crazy. So be safe out there, everybody. We'll have more coverage tomorrow, and there's more WCNC Plus coming up.